But, you know, that's not really part of the ordinance, so.
Questions?
Questions?
No, I'm glad we're doing it. I mean, we've, I think, all separately had conversations about the fact that you talk to folks and they are willing to say, I'd rather have the $150 fine than pay the $250 up front, because, you know, what are the odds that they're actually going to catch me? My only question would be, are we going to, along with amending this, are we going to have more of an effort to enforce it now?
I think so. I mean, it seems that we unintentionally seem to have caught the contractor community flat-footed last year, because they were under the impression, and I do genuinely believe, you know, some of the folks that brought this concern to us, they were under the impression, for whatever reason, I'm not quite sure, that this license was no longer required. And so, as I said, the SPD did issue at least a dozen tickets, but a lot of it also was conversations and educating the operators that you do need to go get a license. So I think by making that clear, and I think it's also communicating to homeowners that if you're contracting with a private person to clear your driveway, clear your parking lot, if you're a business owner, you should really be making sure that this person is licensed and has a city license. And I think that's a message that we need to get out, to just let them know, you know, it's just, if you use an electrician for work done in your house, you should make sure that they're licensed by the city as well. So I think there's definitely some more public outreach that we could do.
And I brought this up before, but have we considered on the website where we put all the info about, you know, the application, the process, whatever, about putting who's, you know, here's a link or information or a number for whoever is actually licensed in the city, is an incentive for a contractor to say, look, I'm actually licensed with the city, you should be using me, not some fly-by-night individual that, you know, God knows what they're going to do.
Speaking for myself, I don't see any concerns with that, where at least, you know, it's not necessarily that we're endorsing their services, but we're just listing that these are the people who are licensed to be performing the service.
Okay.
I have been contacted by a senior citizen constituent of mine from the Comstock neighborhood who has been contacted by the contractor that she hires every year to do her plowing, that the fact that he has to get this license is going to raise her price. And I'm wondering a couple things. So this is a license that they've always been required to have, but that's just largely been ignored because the fee is. And so it's not really a change, it's just enforcement, a change in multiple, okay. But what is the benefit to having this license? Like, what is to the city? Are we better able, is there, it seems, and I'm going to let you answer my question, but it just seems like a certain number of contractors will get the license, and then a whole bunch of them will not. And the ones who do will potentially raise their prices, and those who do not will probably do most of the plowing. So I'm just wondering what the benefit is to the city other than collecting the money. Is there any additional potential oversight? Are there any benefits to the homeowner? Anything like that?
I mean, I think the requirement for the contractors to register, there's a couple benefits. I think using it as an opportunity to educate them on ordinances, that you can't just take the snow and dump it on the sidewalk. You can't dump it on top of a hydrant. You can't leave it in the middle of the street, which many operators do. So I think it's an opportunity to educate them on, here's how you should be operating legally. I think it also helps in identifying drivers. If we, if people are able to get the license, then we're able to, you know, because we do get calls from neighbors complaining about snowplow operators, and so we ask, well, you know, did they have the decal on them to indicate that they were licensed? And if not, well, did you get a license plate number? Is there something that we can do? Or we'll work with SPD if it's really a habitual problem. I mean, I think it's also holding them accountable. I mean, we do have the power to revoke the license if we found that they're just consistently violating city ordinances, not operating within the parameters of what they're supposed to be doing. So, I mean, I think there's a couple different benefits. It's, you know, the cost was changed in, I think it was 2015 or 2016. I think it was initially $20. And so, 2 or 3 years ago, the price was increased. I mean, and also as we get more concentrated and focused and proactive in clearing sidewalks, it really is problematic when these operators are just dumping snow on sidewalks, which
is there
a regular basis.
I'm sorry. Is there like a minimum size to your business that you would? I mean, like if I'm plowing 3 of my neighbors' sidewalks or driveways or something, would I need a license or? No,
it's mainly if you're operating within. If I'm, Dunham Enterprises and I plow one driveway in a neighborhood, I'm required to get a license. So there is no necessarily.
You're actually incorporated as a business.
If you're a business, I believe that's the requirement that you're going to be operating. That doesn't obviously stop people from doing it. I mean, we also have an issue with unlicensed electricians, and if requiring a license alone was enough to get people to comply, I think we'd all be in a lot better place. But it is a requirement because it does cause major issues when plow operators are not abiding by the ordinances.
I just have a suggestion. It might
Sure.
be an interesting idea to offer the opportunity to reduce the cost of the license fee if they attend some sort of a seminar on how city ordinances in the city need to be followed.
Okay.
I can get with that. That I can get with. And let me ask you this, Corey, because I'm listening, right? And Councilor Boyle asked about the neighbor that's plowing 3 driveways, and you said no. But then you have these small operators that do exactly that. So they would be exempt from having to get the license?
No, it's just that if I'm Dunham Enterprises and I plow 8 driveways and I only have my vehicle, that's all I use, then I would pay $250. If I'm Dunham Enterprises and I have 50 vehicles, I'd pay $250 for the initial vehicle and then $50 for each additional vehicle that I need to license.
Okay, let me just go here. B&D has a service, okay? He does snow and he does grass. I'm sure he doesn't have 8 vehicles, don't know, but I'm sure he doesn't. Is he required to still get a license?
If he's doing snow removal, if he's plowing, he's required to get a license, and it's a license for each vehicle that is being used. But obviously, there would be $250 for the initial vehicle and $50 for every additional vehicle.
And then, and I do agree with Susan with the lower fee and making it a little more accessible, because that I can support. But I want to ask you this, because I know we're talking about dumping on the sidewalk, dumping in the street, and it's on the same theme. But I guess for the last couple of years, I've had a real issue with businesses, and it's not more so as dumping it in the street or on the sidewalk. They're building snow castles with the snow on the corners. That's a problem. I think that we need to address that, and I complained about it the whole winter, but you still came on this corner and you couldn't see because they had built a snow castle.
Sure.
So they need to figure out something different with that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I noticed in researching updating this particular ordinance that I need to look more into is that I believe when the ordinance was tweaked a little bit in 2016, that there was a fee for property owners whose sidewalks are blocked by snow. And so I just need to dig into that a little bit more, because that would give us, SPD the chance to actually ticket if it's it's not just that it's unshoveled, it's that you very clearly have contracted with someone who is blocking your sidewalk with snow, who has just dumped sidewalk on the corners.
Because they had given, I think, the commissioner the authority to be able to go in there and ticket those businesses.
DPW does have the authority. We're working through some of that because, both the, plow drivers that might see this private plow operator operating illegally at 4 a.m., is it really the best idea for them to try and confront this person at 4 o'clock in the morning and knock on their window and tell them, I'm issuing you a ticket. And even SPD had some discomfort with that because DPW is just not trained to do those types of things. But we're trying to work with.
My concern is not more so them knocking on the door of an unlicensed driver. My concern is knocking on that business on Spencer Street and telling them that you have a 12-foot mountain on your corner from your snowplow.
Right.
And they should be ticketed for that.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree, and I just need to look into the ordinance more. I mean, and I think as we continue to make sidewalk clearance more and more of a priority, you know, obviously the city's going to have some additional skin in the game this winter. I'm hoping that we can increase enforcement and also just awareness that we're not, you know, this is going to be an issue. And I know also with the sidewalk snow removal plan, a lot of those contractors who are clearing the sidewalks on behalf of the city are going to run into some of these issues. So I think some of them will also rise to the top in the most high pedestrian areas.
Because I know they dump a lot down there on the Inner Harbor. They go and they'll take it from Clinton and they'll dump it down there. So I had looked, and I know it's going to be a cost to the city, but I always say this, sometimes you have to spend money to make things right. I looked at the, but it still wouldn't work because we don't have anywhere for it to run off, because they have those snow melter trucks to where you would melt the snow, but then you'd have to have the runoff, which we can't run into the creek because of the chemicals, so I don't know how well.
Sure. Yeah. No, I know there were some businesses along East Genesee Street right near Nottingham where a lot of students are walking that was always, I always found problematic, and I'd work with SPD to try and address that. But I think as we move toward this sidewalk snow clearing, those properties are going to rise to the top of the priority list because that's where the high pedestrian traffic is. That's where this.
Somewhere for the snow to go though too. When
right.
we get hit in the winter hard,
right.
There's a lack of space for all of this snow too.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, in that case, I'm sympathetic to business owners, but they need to figure it out.
Yes.
It's part of their business.
Corey, are the fees, are they comparable to other cities? How did we come to this number? Yeah,
so I've been trying to see whether there are other cities that have similar ordinances. I looked to Rochester first and wasn't able to locate anything on their website, but that is something that I think we need to check to see whether or not this is really comparable to other cities. So I just don't have that information as of yet.
What have we decided? What have we decided on the actual numbers? Like, so what's the fee going to be?
So
is it staying at the $250?
So it'd be $250, and instead of it being $250 for every single vehicle that you might own, it would $250 and then $50 for every additional.
What's the fine now?
So the fine would be $350.
$350
for not being registered.
For not being registered.
What's the fine for blocking the sidewalk?
So for property owners, it's $100. I'm trying to think of what it was for. I think it was initially $150. Catherine, do you know if we have? Yeah. Okay.
Typically cite both the property owner and the contractor?
I mean, you know, basing it just on last year, I think, you know, I don't want to speak for SPD, but from the information and conversations I've had with them, the tickets went to the operators, which is why I'd like to look more into the fines for the property owners, especially for businesses that are habitually blocking sidewalks, or the person that they've hired to clear snow continuously puts snow in the street. You know, makes it dangerous for motorists, for pedestrians, makes it more difficult for our plow drivers.
And this isn't something that can be done by like a code officer or something else, since it seems the police department has a lot of other things going on?
I mean, I don't know if it's because we're trying to govern the right-of-way and code enforcement. You know, we're talking about if you put stuff in the street or if you put stuff on the sidewalk, and code enforcement's generally limited to private property. Catherine, I don't know if you have any.
Hi, the issues that you're talking about, it's sort of like everything sort of interconnects. Like this one is like this, particularly dealing with like the snow removal contractors. There's requirements because you own a property for clearing the sidewalk. If a code inspector was inspecting something else, saw that you had not cleared your sidewalk, they could cite, but because of the 24-hour rule, it makes it difficult. So it's because often like it's going to have melted by the time they go back to re-inspect. We can look into what the existing ordinances say regarding the snow removal requirements for the property owners, but that's separate than this one. I mean, they sort of intersect because obviously if I'm hiring a snow removal contractor to do it, it's like I have some responsibility, but obviously I'm not the one plowing it, so you don't want to, you want them to remove the snow, they want to be able to have a safe driveway, but if you put the penalty on the property owner, it's going to create a different sort of mess. But I can look into the issues that you're raising.
Whether
and,
code enforcement could play any role.
we can revisit those off,
I mean, the ticket, right, like the way we have parking enforcement people, I'm not saying create like a snow enforcement.
No,
division.
no, but is it something that code enforcement could do in addition to SPD ordinance enforcement? I think it's a valid question.
It's actually not a bad idea if we're gonna go forward saying we're gonna start enforcing sidewalks and roads and all, and driveways and all that. So it actually probably isn't a bad idea to have a separate section, or at least start having that conversation, because we've had conversations about police and overtime and doing things like that, and just from past experience, it would seem like you would probably get officers that are already, on overtime that would want to go do that type of work, as opposed to maybe having some sort of peace officer or community service officer that would go out and do that type of work. That would be more affordable for us.
I actually have a couple of issues with this that keep going through my head, and that is just that I'm concerned that enforcing this and raising the fine is just going to penalize people who are trying to run a legitimate business, and the businesses like that are organized, that are registered, that would come and get a license are typically the kinds of businesses that provide our residents with the most reliable service. When you hire a company that does this, and has multiple trucks, and they say they're going to be there at 4, they're usually there at 4, while you're dealing with someone under the table. It's not necessarily going to be a reliable service. And in the city of Syracuse, where we have more snow than anyone on the planet, snow removal is important. And I'm concerned that, this will make, snow removal companies that are above board not necessarily want to take jobs in the city and end up having our residents with less reliable service. In addition to the fines that we're putting on these companies for doing things like blowing snow into the sidewalks, while I agree that is not okay and no one should do it, we do it. Our plows do it. So it's sort of, and then passing that on to the homeowner, I mean, that's just, I think that's not even something we should be discussing, because I have shoveled my driveway and then had a plow come by and had to do it all over again. Right.
I mean, I think one is that we're not raising the fines with this ordinance. We're actually lowering them. That it was $250 for every single vehicle last year.
The $350 fine
the fine is if you're not following the ordinance, then $250, and that was based on feedback that we got from a number of these large contractors to say, look, you're sort of penalizing me for having a large fleet of vehicles in the city. I want to work in the city, but $250 for every single vehicle just seems punitive. So can you?
Right, but they weren't getting the licenses. We didn't issue any licenses last year. So, and it was sort of a unenforceable thing. And also, I feel that if they're supposed to be reporting, if these people who have licenses are supposed to be reporting on other people that they see in the community without licenses, and then expecting our police to follow up on that, whether, I mean, if we can move it to code enforcement or whatever, but even them, they're spread pretty thin. And I can't necessarily always get police response to actual crime in my neighborhood.
Well, I mean, these go to
that to their workload is a little bit.
I mean, and this goes to ordinance enforcement and SPD, so it's not like someone's choosing between having to solve a homicide and ticket for snow removal.
Sure. I'm afraid what we'll end up with is, above board businesses who have paid for these licenses, who are calling repeatedly on the same company that's taking their business and working under the table and working without a license, and not seeing anything happen because we can't get to it. And I think down the road, that's what I foresee as being something we're going to end up talking about next year.
Sure.
When
Yeah.
we get to this.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to speak for SPD in terms of their enforcement, but it's certainly, you know, we want to make sure, and they've, you know, been part of the conversation, want to make sure this is a manageable workload for them. I mean, I think also in terms of ticketing, you know, if we were to ticket for either private plow operators or property owners, you know, that there is like anything, some discretion. It wouldn't be, you know, a plows going by and pushes snow onto the sidewalk because that plow doesn't have any other chance, you know, any other opportunity. But to President Hudson's point, if there's a 8-foot mound of snow on the sidewalk, that wasn't, you know, oops, I drove by. It's, no, you're intentional. You just don't care, and you're just putting,
But
you
that's
know.
something Bob Doherty worked on for so long, and that we actually got to a point where we're supposed to be ticketing for. And I also
Right.
don't think we issued any.
No, and that's, I
any
mean,
tickets
this,
for that.
yeah, this entire ordinance, the $250 fee, the citing property owners, all starts with Bob Doherty's ordinance. So this is just altering the ordinance that already exists. This isn't a brand new ordinance. So,
But
you
as
know.
much as that seems somewhat unenforceable at this time, because we know that people are doing it, and we know that we haven't caught anybody doing it or given out any tickets, adding to that almost, I mean, it seems like we should sort of get that sort of managed before we start growing that ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily in favor of, you know, I'm not advocating that I'd love to ticket a ton of private property owners to for dumping snow on their sidewalk. I mean, we did issue tickets to the contractors, you know, and SPD would have to speak in terms of how egregious the behavior was that forced them to feel that they needed to ticket. But you know, we're trying to make it easier for people to operate in the city by lowering the cost and taking into account that these large companies in particular provide a lot of great services to the city, and we want to make the cost manageable for them. And so rather than keeping it at $250 for every single vehicle that you have, that's why we're proposing to lower it for additional vehicles.
Okay. Is there anyone in the public that would like to say anything on this snow removal? Okay. All right, well, Corey, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll close this, and then at 1 o'clock, we're going to be discussing revisions to the food truck.
Okay.
Thanks.